All right, here we go. Would you like to start us off with an introduction, or would you like me to do that?
Doesn't matter.
Well, I think first we want to congratulate Tracy, right?
Yes.
So one of our own Keller Williams agents was nominated to be on the board for the Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors. Maybe you could give a little bit more detail on that.
So Tracy Georgieff, she was elected on the GHAR Board of Directors. I think it was in October, and she's officially being put on the board today. There's a special holiday lunch where the different new members of the board are being sworn in, so to speak. Tracy does a lot in the community. She does a lot for the office, our culture. So it was a perfect fit that she got elected on. So we're sad that we're missing it. Anthony and I both are still coughing a lot from post-colds, post-COVID. We didn't want to freak people out. So we're going to stay away from gatherings. And today we're going to discuss in depth the economic model. We chatted about all 4 models last week, just like a high level overview. So we thought it would be cool if we did a deep dive of each model, then kind of explain it a little further. In today's economic model, which might be one of my favorite ones. I was telling Anthony before we got on, I got a little crazy with our outline. And I realized that I probably have to back it down a little bit.
I'm still sharing out as we speak. Just give me one more second here.
Oh, you're fine. While you do that, I'll just share a quote that I heard today. And it just really kind of stuck with me. And it takes the same amount of time and energy to dream small and think small as it does to dream big and think big. So dream big and think bigger.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like I was thinking about it and I'm like, when you do the calculations to figure out what you have to do to make 50,000, 100,000, a million, a billion, it takes you the same amount of time and effort to figure it out. So why not reach for the highest number? And even if you don't reach it, you're still probably doing way better off than if you just went for that small goal.
Yeah.
The $50,000 income. So that just struck a chord with me today. And I feel like it ties into the millionaire real estate agent because I feel like a lot of agents are like, well, I don't want to net a million. Like, I don't need to net a million. I'm content.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. It's not bad to be content. It's good to be content.
Yeah.
And yet, if it takes you the same amount of energy and time to dream big, why not go all out and see what you can really do with it?
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue from our past Facebook Lives. So anybody who's joining us today, if you haven't seen our past episodes, you can go back through the Keller Williams of Central PA page. They're all there. And one of the things we talked about is think big models, think big dreams, think big goals. And what we really covered in those sessions was thinking big allows you to figure out what your future problems or issues are going to be. It allows you to figure out what your fears are going to be along the way. And if you think small or plan small, you may not actually uncover those things until you're in the process. But if you think big models and you think big goals early on, you can clear a lot of that stuff out of the way and get a lot more momentum and traction, as we call it, towards your goals quickly. So today's, I don't know if today's my favorite model, but it's definitely the one that gives us the most clarity, I think. Obviously we have, and again, for anybody who hasn't joined us before, we teach 4 business models in business planning. That's the lead generation model, the economic model, the budget model, and the organizational model. The budget model is pretty simple, self-explanatory. So is the organizational model. Lead generation model, also self-explanatory, right? The economic model, people say, well, what's that? What does that mean? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So we want to show you guys some different graphics, and we'll even show you the inside of our systems that allow us to plan this and track it accurately without tracking and reporting and consistently reviewing the progress towards those goals and our business plan. It's very difficult then to know what the real problems or issues are. Also very difficult to take action to correct the course to get back on goal if you get off course. And then most importantly, I think it's important when you're hiring or you have somebody else working for you and you're trying to train them up or get them to peak performance. The economic model at its simplest form, it allows you to track their results so that you can then go and help with their process or training, rather than just saying, hey, it's the person, they're not getting results. So
I love that's probably why I like the economic model so much, is it can almost pinpoint like exactly where your issues are.
right, there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get rolling. What
So-
questions do you have right out of the gate?
I think it would just be, what is the economic model in its simplest form? And then breaking down what each of those pieces mean. Because we talk oftentimes, just saying GCI, cost of sales, net income, and not everybody thinks like that, or they don't talk in those terms. So they may not really understand what that is. To them, they're like, here's my commissions, I take out my taxes, and that's what I have left.
Yeah. So do you want me to share my screen and show you the graphic?
I think that would be awesome.
Cool. All right. So let's see, are you able to see this?
Yep.
Okay. So you see across here, up at the top here, this is inside of our command system, which is our all-in-one system to help agents run their business. It does everything from marketing, tracking, reporting, DocuSign, closings, transaction coordination, everything in one system. So up at the top, what you see is this is how we start with the business planning goals. And you'll see here, this is step one, and it's setting goals. So it's defaulted to the millionaire real estate agent model where you're netting $1 million in profit. In order to do that, you would need 2.5 million in gross commissions income and be at a 40% profit margin, 30% cost of sale, and 30% operating expenses. So this right here is a model to show you in your economic plan, we will need to go achieve 2.5 million in gross commissions to net out 1 million. Excuse me. Let's make this really simple. What if this was 250,000 and this was 100,000 in gross profit to the agent? And then the agent would be able to afford 30% cost of sale and 30% operating expenses to hire help, spend on marketing costs. And we're going to dive down into each one of these and talk about it. Now, what we find is that a single agent is able to achieve somewhere between a 60 and 70% profit margin because they don't have assistants. They don't need to hire anybody. And oftentimes their business is generated through their sphere of influence and they're not paying for leads or they're not paying for marketing. So in that case, they have low cost of sale and low operating expenses and therefore a higher profit margin. But as this net profit grows and you grow the gross commissions, you will need to hire people and put them in your operating expenses. You will need to spend some money in marketing to get to this level and have that cost in your cost of sale, as well as other agents and their broker splits and things like that. So what I like about this, like you said, this is the simplest. It's not only the simplest version of the economic model, it's the first step in the economic model, which is what are your income goals, and what are your business model goals? What percentages do you want down here along the bottom? I'm big on just doing examples. So Brittany, would it be cool if I just run through an example real quick?
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, so I'm going to use you as the example. Okay, you're an agent that has come to us for business planning. One of the first questions is, what is your goal next year? So 2022, what would be your annual profit goal? What would you like to take home?
So let's say 100,000.
Okay, and you see how everything else has automatically updated.
Yep.
Now, as a single agent, we're going to expect that your business operating expenses, and some of this comes from just doing it so often with so many agents, and the knowledge is already there. So we're not expecting folks to know this themselves. We're going to give you a benchmark. So as a single agent, we're going to want your expenses to be right around 15% or less, which is about $27,000. Okay. Now, I know that because you gave me a goal of an annual profit of 100,000, and we're going to look at what it takes to get to this gross commissions goal. We know that oftentimes the only marketing that a single agent is doing is maybe some pop buys, meaning they're going to stop by a past client's house or meet up with a past client or somebody in their sphere of influence, and they're going to have an item of value, say, a gift certificate, something to, give those folks. I did include a little bit of marketing dollars in here. Let's say it's some online lead generation, maybe Facebook ads, something like that. Okay. But I would expect this to be, for a single agent, to be somewhere between 10 to 15%.
Okay.
And then in the cost of sale, excuse me, once again, this is going to be somewhere between 10 to 15%. Okay. Now, what that says is this is my cost of sale here, which is $21,000. This is going to have your broker splits in here. That's the primary thing that's in cost of sale. Okay. So far, I've included any, transaction coordination down here in operating expenses. So we now know that this agent needs to go out, because our economic model says that in order for you as a single agent to go out and make $100,000, you should be somewhere around $142,000 in gross commissions. Okay. So for single agent, you now have a gross commissions target in order to know what your profit is. A lot of the agents that we talk to don't know what either one of these numbers are. They know what their goal is. And then sometimes they say, well, my goal is to make 142 or 150. And then they drive towards that goal, but they're not keeping in mind that there's a cost of sale and operating expenses in order for them to get there. So that's why we always start with the profit goal. Then we start with what we think are reasonable targets for cost of sale and operating expenses. And then we know what they need to get in gross commissions income. So what I like about this is the economic model takes it 2 steps further. And it says, what is your percentage of buyers and what is your percentage of listings? I'm just going to leave it here, leave it simple at 50-50. Okay. And then we're going to show you what your conversion rates need to be from lead to appointment, appointment to listing or buyer client, or listing to contract, and contract to close. We break it down into each one of those sections. So if we haven't made this clear yet, what we are accomplishing here is we're measuring out each part of the business and we're saying, this is what we can reasonably expect. If we control these percentages, we can reasonably expect that we're going to make $100,000 next year. And then we go out throughout the year and we track weekly and monthly. This system actually tracks it inside the system. It tells you if you're on goal or not each day and each week. We go out and we track it all the time and review it to make sure that we're on task. Let's say, for example, or on target. Let's say, for example, at the end of December, I'm going to review my P&L, and I want to know, did my P&L for last month and the last 90 days, am I at 70% annual profit? Am I at a 70% profit margin? Am I at 15% cost of sale? Am I at 15% operating expenses for that month and that past quarter? And if the answer is no, I have something to fix. I have to go fix it, change it, or improve it, right?
Yep.
So the economic model allows us to do that. It allows us to measure and go back and make improvements and changes in order to get back on target. Now I did put down here, average commissions of $71.50 per transaction, which runs off of average sale price in our market. So you'll want to know those numbers, and you can, with the economic model, you can easily have a vision of what you need to accomplish for the next year. More importantly, you have goals at each one of these levels that you can then measure consistently in order to ensure that by the end of the year, you hit that goal. Anything you want to share there?
I think what else is helpful with it is a lot of times agents are like, should I spend money on this marketing tool? Should I spend money on these leads? And it kind of comes, it does it. If they have this model set up, they can look at, well, how much are my cost of sales allowed to be?
Yeah.
How much are my operating expenses allowed to be? And basically, anytime they go to make a new expense, the first thought should just be like, well, how is this going to affect my net income? And how does it affect my percentages? And that kind of gives them the red light or green light if they can move forward or not. If it's above that percentage, they know they're probably not ready for that expense yet. So I think it's helpful because we hear it. I even heard it today. I had an agent say, I just don't know how much money I should spend on this. What does your model say?
It's a great explanation. And I love the red light, green light analogy as well, like we talked about in our previous lives.
Yeah, it's easier when you have the numbers right here in front of you. And you don't have to sit there and calculate it out. You don't have to use an Excel spreadsheet. You plug in your goals and Command populates it for you.
Yeah, now here, and this is the second part of the economic model, is it breaks down now your big goals and your big model down into measurable steps in your business. How many leads do you need to generate? How many contacts you need to make out of those leads? How many appointments do you need to set out of your contacts? How many appointments do you need to keep out of your appointment set? Agreements, under contract, pending, and closed units. So here's what I want everybody to realize is that, one, we know from coaching and training that there are some standard measurements for this, whether you're generating leads from Sphere or whether you're generating leads from marketing. What we start with, we don't say, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. How come yours is so far off? Or, wow, you did a great job. Your conversion rate's 100%, right? What we do is we start with what the agent or the team has done already last year. And we sit down and we get a reasonable expectation out of their previous progress and performance. And we start with that as a benchmark. And then we say, okay, well, if you got 100 leads last year and you were able to contact 50% of those people, then your lead to contact rate's 50%. You did it last year. So we're going to do it again. Now, maybe if they add in that, maybe if that's all Sphere and they add in an online lead source, we say, okay, how many leads are you going to generate from Sphere and how many leads are you going to generate from online source? And then we're going to get a blended average and we're going to put that number in here. Okay. We always start with what they did before because that's their baseline. That's what they can go and do again this year for sure. Mm-hmm. Right? They did it last year. So we start with that, and then we have an as-is economic model for folks. And then out of that as-is, we say, what are your plans for next year? What are your goals for next year? What are we doing between this year and next year to grow and improve? And when we get to next year, at the end of this upcoming year, 2022, when we get to 2023, this is what your economic model will look like at that point in time after you've grown into these other areas and these other conversions. Was that clear?
Yeah, that was super helpful. And I think what's great about that is everybody's business is different. So your leads to contacts might be higher or lower depending on where those leads are coming from. So if your business is all Zillow leads, you might have a lower percentage of contact than if you're comparing yourself, which you shouldn't do, but if you were comparing your conversion rates to an agent who's purely Sphere. So that's why it's hard to just have a standard number, because everybody's business and where they get it from can be very different.
Yeah. And my favorite's when we sit down and everybody says, well, that's 100%, that's 100%, and that's 100%. So, and sometimes it may be, but in order to grow the business and add in additional resources or leads, people into that process, and so on and so forth, it won't be 100%.
Right. It's gonna fall short.
You're gonna want to plan with reasonable expectations. So appointments set to appointments kept, we keep that somewhere around 75%. And now let's look at it this way. So appointment set to appointment kept. If you have online lead sources, you talk to somebody you've never met them before, they agree to come in and meet you in the office to go through a buyer consultation. And 50% of the online lead sources, the number is more like 50%. 50% of the time, they're not going to show up or not get pre-qualified. Or not call the lender before they come, and maybe you postpone something like that, right?
Yep.
But we know that for referrals from Sphere, at almost 100% of the time, those people are going to show up. So we use a blended average of 75. But if you're marketing heavy, lead generation heavy, and not Sphere heavy, referral and heavy with leads from your Sphere, then you're going to want to have this more towards 50%. If all your business comes from online lead sources or Facebook or lead generation, marketing, mailing, all those things, you're going to want it around 50%. Just another example of how these numbers change. And then appointments kept to the number of people. It says agreements. That's the number of people that you're going to work with after that consultation. You won't work with everybody. Agreements to under contract or pending. And I love this one because, yes, buyers are way different than sellers now. This blended average, we would have to sit down and have a conversation about that. How are you making out? Are you getting a lot of your buyers under contract, or is it hit and miss often?
Mm-hmm.
And then my favorite is everybody is giving us 100% in this category when it comes to listings. And they're probably right. Right now, you should sell 100% of the properties you list. So that's an example of how these models change with market itself or over time. And, again, we can use a standard to help them grow. This is where we think you should be in the future. And then we use where they are now as their as-is model and slowly begin to improve that. So for instance, let's say somebody slowly improving that, let's say somebody has a 50% lead to contact rate. So they're contacting 50% of the leads that come in.
Okay.
Actually, that's a really high number. Let me grow a different area here. How about 20% of the people that they talk to on the phone actually come in and have an appointment with them? And we say, hey, we don't say, hey, the industry standard is 50%. Like, you got to get there. We say, what can we do to turn that 20 into a 25 or 30%? So that the rest of your economic model increases exponentially, right?
Yep.
So what we do in our business planning is we say, okay, this year in our business plan, we need to add this in, this tool, this system, this resource, this process, this person, in order to get you from 20 to 25%. Now you have a plan to grow your business and improve. And that one conversion ratio, let's do it. When I change that to 30%, excuse me. All right, it's going to change it on the next screen, so you couldn't see it. But the point is it changes the number of, I now need to schedule less appointments or keep less appointments and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite part about the conversion piece of it. As a buyer's agent on a team, I was able to take the same amount of appointments and yet make more money because I had improved my set to met and my met to signed conversions.
There you go.
So it's working smarter, not harder. You can increase your net income by just figuring out how to tweak and improve what you're already doing.
Very much. Yep. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay. I'm scared.
If you are, that's why I gave you a warning. So if you were to come in here and improve your business, let's say next year, you wanted to grow your gross profit. You want to get to 120,000 in gross profit.
Okay.
Which one of these parts of your economic model would you focus on fixing first?
Based on those numbers, I would work on contacts.
Okay. I mean, any answer is correct. It depends on the person.
Yeah, for me,
Right?
I always went for my lowest percentage, and then that's what I tried to grow.
I love that. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because is it reasonable to expect that you can, increase appointments kept to 80% or 90%?
Might be hard.
It would be hard. Actually, I really appreciate your perspective on that. Yes, the lowest percentages might be the easiest ones
to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, the example I was going to give is that, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm coughing with you.
I am doing my best. If you're able to increase the top percentages, then that's less in the bottom of the funnel that you need to fix, or that it's less in the bottom of the funnel that you need to improve.
Yeah.
And I love Brittany's example of, and those are usually where your lower conversion rates are, hopefully. The last thing I'll say here is, as agents, we can always improve our skills, always. Like it's a never ending thing that you can just keep going and improve your skills. There's skills trainings for each one of these steps. So if you find yourself setting appointments or making contacts, you find yourself making a ton of contacts with people, but nobody wants to come in and do a consultation with you. You go out, you do this training to convert. And when you do that training, now you've grown your entire business. You focused on the one thing that you needed to improve and you grew the entire business. I think a lot of times as business owners, agents, team leaders, we try to focus on all of the numbers in the economic model. And this allows us to focus on the one area that has the biggest impact because you're able to see where your conversions are off.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think, what's the word? It's when you're trying, what's the phrase there? Jack of all trades, a master at none. You got to master one piece of it or at least get really good at it, maybe over 50%. And then you can kind of start looking at another number. I know agents hate to hear the word scripts. And we offer a lot of script training. At the end of the day, we use scripts all day, every day, and people don't like to admit it. But even when you're talking to your family, like you're scripting, every day I ask my kids, what was something that made you smile at school today? Well, it's a script because I'm trying to get them to talk to me. And if I just say, what'd you do today? I get, oh, I don't know. But if I change my wording to what's something that made you smile today, I get more answers.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's just funny because when you were talking about that, like agents, they're like, I don't want to go to script training. I don't need scripts. I just want to be myself. You
Yeah,
spend all day every day.
that is true. Anything you want to end on there? What was an aha moment for you?
I think for me, it's just how knowing your numbers
Mhm.
opens doors for your business. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to work harder. Like some people might think, well, if I want to go from 100,000 to 150, I'm already spinning my wheels. I'm exhausted. I need more balance. Knowing your numbers, tracking your numbers will show you where you can work smarter, not necessarily harder, and you can actually increase those numbers.
That's so good. So true. I'm reading over some of your notes here too, trying to get ahead. And do you want to get into breaking down the specifics in each one of those areas?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do
Specific
that.
gross commission income, what does it mean? Specific cost of sale, what are some examples?
Yeah, because I think, for you and I, we talk about it all the time, but somebody might truly not understand the difference between maybe a newer agent. What's the difference between cost of sale versus operating expense?
Okay. All right. I love it. So once again, we can keep this super, super simple. And that's what I love about the system. We
Mhm.
used to have all this stuff in spreadsheets and it was like, "Ooh, how does that work?" Um, so when you go back to this, let me go back to the goal planning real quick.
So sorry.
Because right here in the system, it's right there.
Yep, it
You
highlights it
just,
for
yeah,
you.
you hover over it. Here's your explanation. These are the specifics. So obviously, annual profit is the amount of profit your business earns before taxes and after subtracting the cost of sale and operating expenses. So just keep in mind that this is before taxes. Okay. Cost of sale. Now, these are expenses that are made only when a transaction takes place, right? They're tied to a transaction, broker commissions and fees. Transaction coordination you can put in here as well. If it is paid per the transaction. If you hire a transaction coordinator who's paid hourly or they're an employee, then that goes down into operating expenses. And that has a lot to do with what your CPA says. We're going to spend a whole Facebook Live on the budget model and why those two differences are important to your CPA and your chart of accounts when you file for taxes. One's a subcontractor, one's an employee. And also one's tied to the transaction. And there's another thing you can put in here. It does say transactional ISAs as well. That would be if, let's say, I hire ISA as inside sales associate. So it's somebody who calls leads, make contacts, and sets appointments. If I hire that person at $12 to $15 an hour, and then I give them a 10% of a bonus or closing bonus of 10% of the commissions or 5% of the commissions. That's just one example of a pay plan for an ISA. Small salary, percentage of the commissions when they close. Salary is going to go in my operating expenses. The commissions when it closes is going to go in cost of sale. So that's why you see ISA in here. It's because it's tied to the transaction. It's a percentage of the transaction, and therefore, and it's only going to be paid if and when the property closes. So that's why an ISA would go in here. Now, again, if you hire an ISA and they're only hourly and that's all you're paying them, or say you pay them a bonus each week for an appointment scheduled, then that all goes into operating expenses. The other things in here are the market center or the brokerage, commission splits, transaction fees. And then this says any other transaction dependent expenses. So that could also be, what I used to put in here was closing gifts. If you do closing gifts for your clients, that's tied to the transaction and it's a cost of sale. That's not a business operating expense. And again, I'm trying to give you a summary of these things. We have a chart of accounts, a P&L, and a budget model that's about 250 lines long that goes into great detail about what you would do in each one of these categories. So we're just giving you a summary of the model right now.
And if all of that makes you sick to your stomach, we have a bookkeeper that you can hire to take care of all that for you.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Because it is time consuming. Like when I was an agent, I had to time block time once a week just to go through and make sure, because if I waited too long, it was such a mess. It is time consuming. So it might be something you want to leverage if you don't like it.
Yep. Great point. So business operating expenses, they occur whether you have any transactions or not. They're reoccurring whether you have any transactions or not. They are salaries, most lead generation and marketing expenses, education, occupancy, automobile expenses, and a long list of other things. Licensing, all of those things. Again, any expense that you have in your business that occurs whether or not you have a transaction goes in operating expenses. And, for most agents, let's say it's a single agent. These expenses are gas. Is a big one. Yeah, I mean, driving all over the place for sure. Meals, charitable donations. Those are all examples of operating expenses or expenses that can get put into the operating expense category. And then your big ones in this category as you grow as a team, as you hire, are salaries. That's often, your biggest expenses in the operating expense category: marketing, salaries. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the rule of thumb that you should get a 10-to-1 return on your marketing expenses. Nowadays, it's more like a 5-to-1, meaning that, I can never have a marketing budget that's over 20% of my gross income. Okay. And it should be 10%. So if I'm making, let's say, $142,000 a year in gross commissions income, then I can't spend any more than $14,000 a year in marketing expenses. And if I have my operating expenses at 15%, 10% of that is marketing, and then 5% that's left over is really dues and fees and those sort of things. Yeah. So I want everybody to see that in operating expenses, if you're doing marketing, you should be spending about 10% of your gross commissions income in marketing. And if you're going to do 10% of your income in marketing, you're probably going to want your operating expenses to be somewhere around 20%. Okay. And then when you hire somebody, obviously that number is going to shoot up. But when you hire somebody, so your goals for your gross commissions also shoots up. That hire needs to give you a return on investment, the same as your marketing gives you a return on your investment. So therefore, you need to increase your expectations of your gross commissions goal.
Well,
if you hire.
That makes sense too, because it wasn't the team cost of sales and operating expenses around 30%.
That's correct.
So that makes sense.
Let's do a practical example. I'm a single agent currently closing $142,000 a year in gross commissions income, right?
Yep.
And that's about 20 homes, by the way. We said our average commission was $7,100. So this is about 18, 19 homes per year. Excuse me. And I say, hey, next year, I want to grow my business to 40 homes. What's it going to take to get there? Well, I'm going to need to hire an assistant. I'm going to need to spend some money on marketing. Make sense?
Yep.
So then I say, well, what's reasonable for me to spend in marketing in order to grow my business next year? We just said 10%. So I'm going to go $14,000 I'm going to spend next year in marketing that I didn't spend this year. So I'm going to add that to my expenses. 14,000. Let's just go 35,000, right?
Yep.
Look what it did. It immediately told me what I need to go out and get in gross commissions income. Okay. But it didn't change my profit. And if I say, hey, I expect a 10-to-1 return on that 14,000, I should be able to go out, excuse me, and make another 140,000. But that, again, in today's market is not so realistic anymore. So if it's, say, you're going to hold it to a 5-to-1 return, you're going to hold it, the spend accountable to a 5-to-1 return, then I should reasonably be able to expect that I'm going to make another $70,000 next year.
Okay.
And you see my annual profit margin went down. In order for me now to make $170,000 in profit next year, I now have an extra $14,000 to spend in marketing. That $14,000 in marketing needs to bring in around another $80,000 in gross commissions income. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And and now your percentage is right.
Correct.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think oftentimes what I'm trying to show here is oftentimes we look at expense as adding an expense is going to take away from our profit. And what we really need to look at is if I add this expense, it has to give me that extra income or I'm not doing it. Right?
Yep. Yep.
The same way you have to look at, hey, when I want to grow my income, when I want to grow my annual profit from 100 to 170, the reverse is true, which means I have to go out and spend money to get there. They work hand in hand. So in business planning, we say, where are you right now? What's your current model? What's your goal for next year? And when we take your current model and all your proven numbers, and we put it right next to your goals for next year, it's going to tell you where you need to spend your money or add in people and resources. That's the purpose of the economic model. So I feel like I needed to take a deep breath. I'm sorry, I'm like off and running.
No, you're fine. This is my mind right now. Like, it's funny because I read the chapter and even then my mind was blown and I was looking at all those graphics I wanted to share. And now I'm looking at this and I'm like, it's really fascinating to me because a lot of times people are like, I want to grow, but I don't know how to do it. And that's where then they just stop. They hit that wall of, I don't know what to do. So hopefully I just magically get more transactions and hopefully I grow my business next year. Whereas the system, you plug it in and it'll tell you exactly where and what to do.
Yep. Well, I have a fun story for you. So this is all about business models. Hopefully at this point, folks can see how this is a model, kind of like modeling clay, right?
Okay.
Or Play-Doh. Have you heard my Play-Doh story before?
No, I'm very intrigued.
Sweet. All right. Great story about how sometimes you just need a small adjustment in your business in order to completely change everything that you're doing. Okay. And that's what we do in business planning. We take where you are right now and we teach you how to make one small adjustment. So I'll tell you this story. In like late 40s, early 50s, natural gas was being put into most of the cities and the homes, and therefore people were getting off of coal heat. This gentleman built an empire of this cleaning product, and it was dough that you would roll on the walls to clean off all of the charcoal soot, right? He had manufacturing plants all across the country. It was a cleaning product. It was super successful, and it was all ready to tank. Then his sister-in-law was a nursery school teacher, and she added a drop of food coloring to his dough, and Play-Doh was born. And often ran a toy empire that's lasted for 70 years and is still 70 years later, one of children's and maybe even some adults' favorite things to play with. And what's Play-Doh? Like, you mold it, you make things out of it, right? It's the same thing as business models. And you can take two colors of Play-Doh and you can put them together and get a new color, right? So I just want everybody to see with business models, what's so intriguing and so important about using them is you get to create what you want. And Brittany, you and I could sit here for half an hour. We could tweak these numbers and we can put in what we want here and what we want there and what we want to expect, out of this and, what we're happy with, what's going to give us the perfect life. What's the perfect business that gives us the perfect life? Maybe I'm willing to give up quite a bit of this profit to have a more balanced life. And therefore I go and hire somebody and it now fits my new model, right? Or what if I'm struggling to grow and I don't know which area of the business that I need to fix? Well, with models, your as is model and the model that gets you to where you want to be, we can see where the food coloring needs added in between. And I think where this is so overwhelming for people is they're like, how do I go and figure all this out? And with models, you can sit down and say, you don't have to figure it all out. You only need to figure out this one drop of food coloring. That's it. And they get the one drop of food coloring and they put it in and they got Play-Doh. Right?
That is so cool.
So I love the Play-Doh story.
I'm
But it's so true.
I'm going to steal that. Yeah, it is true.
Yep.
Yeah, and the cool thing about for the Play-Doh business is kids, they do mix it all together to make new colors. And then as parents, you're constantly buying more Play-Doh. So it's just ingenious.
It is. Yeah. Everything turns out black or brown in the end.
Yeah.
That's the kids, not the business models.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to be winding down, and I know we probably didn't get through 2/3 of your content. What other questions do you have? And let's see if we can get through it.
I actually think we honestly got through most of it.
Good.
Because I'm just coming through here, like you ended up answering a lot of my questions. If an agent doesn't have this system, how can an agent track their conversion rates?
It's a great question. So the simplest model is, the simplest way of tracking is just a spreadsheet. But you need to do it consistently. You need to do it every day. We have scorecards that we use each day. So for instance, let's say you have a team, the agents and operations will meet up in the morning for a morning huddle. What was yesterday's results? How many leads did we get? How many contacts did we make? How many appointments did we set? Same things we showed you there. But those teams, if they're not using a system, are using spreadsheets.
Okay.
And then those spreadsheets can report just like these, can create a report.
Okay. And that's something that if they did do a consult with you, that you could help them create as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's perfect. Well, that's it. That whole command piece actually helped a ton, made it much more simpler than I thought it was going to be. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I love that. System's great, especially for this exercise. What's really cool, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Once you hit save inside that system, it's going to track everything that you're doing and tell you if you're on goal or not. It's going to track your daily, weekly, monthly progress and say, hey man, you're 5 contacts behind. You didn't generate enough leads this week. And how hard is it for us as business owners and producers, leaders and agents, how hard is it for us to keep track of all of that while you're out trying to do your job? You need the systems for tracking and reporting. What I really love about this is you get to put your goals inside of a system and then the system already tracks your tracking and reporting. And for years, and we still have some things on spreadsheets and, our leadership team, for instance, we have our scorecard measurables on spreadsheets. And, so sometimes it's necessary to have stuff outside of the system, but man, is it great to have it all in one place. And, in the past, what happened for me and the teams I was running is that we don't have it all in a system like this. You actually have to hire somebody to go out and gather the information and then track it and report it and put it in 3 different places and then give you 3 different reports, right?
Yep.
Think of all of that time and labor and everything that can just be eliminated, and that's the purpose of getting all this stuff into one system that sort of does it for you.
Well, and now teams can also report in that system, in the sense that if you're a team leader, your agents can report to you their numbers.
Right.
And then it compiles in a very similar looking manner. So you can look at your individual team members and see where maybe they need help and coached.
Yep.
And also, how is it affecting your goal as a team overall? Which is, I think, way better than looking at a bunch of spreadsheets.
For sure.
And I love spreadsheets. So coming from someone like me, I think that says a lot.
Awesome. Anything you want to end with?
No, I think this was super helpful. And even after I've read it, I've talked about it, just going through it again with that system actually made things even more clear for me, which I think is helpful. So now next week, if I'm correct, we would be going over the lead. Is it budget model next and then lead gen model?
Whichever one you tell me it is, Brittany.
It'll be a surprise.
I think it's so in business
lead gen
planning or in the book.
In the book. I think in the book, he then talks about lead gen because based on your conversion rates, you need to know what type of lead gen you need to do, which helps you outline your budget. If I remember.
Sounds
correctly.
right.
Let's fingers crossed.
Yeah, that sounds correct. Excuse me, sorry.
No worries. Well, awesome. Thanks
Alrighty.
for having on here.
Absolutely.
We'll be back here 12 o'clock next Wednesday. And
Sounds
hopefully
good.
we're both coughing less.
Yes. Thanks, Brittany. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yep.
Have
Bye.
a great day.